Addiction, a legacy passed down. My mother was addicted to drugs, and in an instant, my life changed. For reasons of safety and anonymity, I will only share my name. I am Jacob, and I grew up in Florida, where life seemed simple and carefree. Everything changed when I discovered that my mother was addicted to drugs. She had always been a role model for me, but her struggle with addiction shattered our relationship. I witnessed her decline, which had a profound impact on me. At first, I didn't understand what was happening, but over time, the truth became clear. When I was 10, I began to notice strange changes in her behavior. She often left me alone for long hours, sometimes even for whole days. I heard her crying at night and occasionally loud arguments with strangers. Gradually, my mother lost her job and our friends. She became increasingly isolated and dependent on drugs. I tried to help her, but it was impossible. At school, I also couldn't find support. Kids laughed at me because they knew about my mother's problems. Teachers tried to help, but their efforts were in vain. I started to feel isolated and helpless. My childhood was destroyed by her addiction. I hated myself for not being able to change anything. The inner pain and despair only grew. At 16, I fell into the trap of drugs myself. It was the only thing that could dull the pain and despair I felt every day. Initially, it was light drugs, but over time, I moved on to heavier ones. My grades fell, and I began to avoid friends. I felt lost and alone, but I couldn't stop. Addiction became my only solace. My days turned into chaos and disorder. I could no longer control my life. My thoughts were constantly focused on the next dose. My mother was in even worse shape. She cried when she was sober and became angry when she was under the influence of drugs. We often fought, and I blamed her for all my troubles. It was an endless cycle of pain and frustration. My mother attempted suicide several times, but each time she was saved. Each attempt only deepened my despair. I felt guilty for not being able to help her. Eventually, I found her dead in the bathroom. She had overdosed, and this time no one could save her. It was the final blow for me. I felt helpless and abandoned. After her death, I was left alone. No one cared for me. I dropped out of school and began living on the streets. Drugs became my only solace. I became even more dependent and started dealing drugs to survive. It was a dangerous and dirty life, but I saw no other way out. My life turned into a nightmare, and I couldn't find an escape. One day, during one of these deals, I met a guy named Tommy. He became my friend and mentor. We did illegal work together and shared everything. Tommy was older than me and knew how to survive in this world. He taught me everything I needed to know to avoid getting into more trouble. He became like an older brother to me. But one day, everything went wrong. Tommy and I were on one of our usual missions when everything turned into a nightmare. We were ambushed and the police started shooting. In the panic, I shot Tommy. It was an accidental shot, but it was fatal. I killed the only person who understood and supported me. I was in shock. I was arrested and convicted of murder. In prison, I felt utterly shattered. My conscience was tormenting me. Every day, I saw Tommy's face in my nightmares. The guilt and shame were eating me alive. I realized that I couldn't continue living this way, but I didn't know how to change my life. In prison, I met a gang who offered me a job upon release. They knew about my skills and saw potential in me. They promised me protection and money if I agreed to become their courier. It was a dangerous and terrifying life, but I saw no other option. I agreed because I had no other choices. After my release, I started working for them. My life turned into a continuous nightmare. I was always in fear and tension. I had to carry out terrible tasks and often risked my life. I felt trapped with no way out. Addiction only worsened the situation. I couldn't find any bright moments in my life. Every day was a struggle for survival. I constantly fought the urge to escape and start a new life, but fear and addiction kept me captive. My body was exhausted and my mind was shattered. I often thought about suicide, but something always stopped me. Maybe it was hope for a better future, though weak. One day, I met a girl named Laura. She worked at a rehabilitation center where I had tried to get help several times. Laura saw in me a person in need of rescue. She started helping me even when I didn't ask for it. She was a light in my dark life. Her kindness and patience began to change me. Laura helped me through the toughest moments. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She showed me that life could be different. She became my friend and support. Thanks to her, I began to see a glimmer of hope in my life. But this was only the beginning of my journey to recovery. With Laura's help, I began going through rehabilitation. It was a difficult and painful process, but I knew I had to go through it. My addiction was so strong that sometimes I thought I would never be able to overcome it. But Laura was always there, encouraging and supporting me. Her belief in me gave me the strength to fight. During rehabilitation, I met many people who were also battling their addiction. Their stories were similar to mine, and it helped me feel that I was not alone. We supported each other, shared our pains and hopes. It was a challenging path, but every small step forward was a significant victory for me. I began to believe that I could change my life for the better. Every day, I struggled with the temptation to return to my old life. It was hard to stop when everything around me reminded me of drugs. Every step on the path to recovery was a test. I felt a constant fear of relapsing and losing everything. But I knew I had to hold on for myself and for Laura, who believed in me. One day, during group therapy, I shared my story. It was difficult, but I felt it was necessary. I talked about my mother, about how her addiction ruined our lives. I shared my own struggle about how I killed Tommy and how it haunted me every night. People listened to me with understanding and compassion. After that, I felt a sense of relief. It seemed like I had finally lifted part of the burden from myself. I began to open up more to others and to myself. It was an important step on the road to recovery. I realized that to heal, I needed to accept my past and start living anew. Laura continued to support me. She showed me that life could be different without drugs and constant pain. She taught me to find joy in small things and appreciate every moment. Thanks to her, I began to feel that I could find my way in this world. But this was just the beginning of my new journey. However, my struggle was not over yet. One day, when I thought I was getting close to recovery, I relapsed again. It was a terrible fall. All my efforts seemed futile. I felt utterly shattered. The inner pain engulfed me once more. I began to think that I would never be able to fully break free from my addiction. Laura didn't leave me even then. She continued to support me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Her faith and love gave me the strength to fight. She showed me that with each fall, I became stronger. Her words and support were like a beam of light in the darkness. I began to understand that my struggle with addiction was not just a physical process. It was a deep psychological and emotional challenge. I had to learn how to manage my emotions, find new ways to handle stress and pain. It was difficult, but I knew it was necessary for my recovery. My days started to become more stable. I began to find small joys in everyday life. Walks in the fresh air, reading books, spending time with friends. These things helped me distract myself from thoughts of drugs. I started to appreciate every moment of my life, even the smallest joys. However, my past continued to haunt me. I often had nightmares where I saw Tommy's face. I felt a constant guilt for what I had done. It was hard, but I tried to find a way to forgive myself. I knew that if I couldn't forgive myself, I would never be able to fully recover. One night, during one of these difficult times, I decided to write a letter to Tommy. I told him everything I felt. I asked for his forgiveness and shared my struggle. It was difficult, but I felt a sense of relief. It was my way of lifting a part of the burden off myself and finding peace in my soul. Laura supported me in this. She said that it was an important step toward recovery. She showed me that it was important to find a way to forgive myself and accept my past. It was hard, but I knew it was necessary. I had to find peace in my soul to continue my path to recovery. With each day, I felt better. My confidence grew, and I began to see a future without drugs. It was difficult, but I knew I could handle it. Laura and my new friends supported me every step of the way. They showed me that I wasn't alone and that there were people willing to help. My battle with addiction was far from over, but I knew I was on the right path. Each day was a new challenge, but I was ready for it. I knew that with each step, I was becoming stronger and closer to my goal, living free from drugs and finding my purpose in life. However, there were still many challenges ahead. One day, I ran into an old friend with whom I used to do drugs. He offered me a return to my old life, and it was a real test for me. I felt tempted but knew I had to hold firm. I said no to him and realized that I was stronger than I thought. This incident only strengthened my resolve. I understood that every day I made the right choice, and it made me stronger. I was no longer the weak boy who turned to drugs to escape pain. I had become an adult man ready to fight for his life and future. I continued to work on myself. Each day, I learned to manage my emotions and find new ways to live without drugs. I started exercising, meditating, and finding new hobbies. All of this helped me stay focused and positive. I knew that with each day I was growing stronger. One day, during another therapy session, I recalled the moment when my mother took her own life. It was the most painful memory of my life. I realized that her death was the result of her own struggle with addiction. It made me think about how many people suffer from this. I realized that I didn't want to end my life the same way. This moment became a turning point for me. I decided that I would fight not only for myself, but also for everyone else suffering from addiction. I started volunteering at a rehabilitation center where I met Laura. I wanted to help others find their way to recovery. This gave my life new meaning. Working at the center was hard, but very important to me. I saw others going through the same struggles I had. It helped me better understand myself and my past. I began to feel that I could change my life and the lives of others. It was a great satisfaction for me. Every day at the center, I saw people struggling with their addiction. Their stories were similar to mine, and it helped me feel that I wasn't alone. We supported each other, sharing our pains and hopes. It was a tough journey, but every small step forward was a significant victory for me. I began to believe that I could change my life for the better. Over time, I started to feel that I had found my purpose in life. I was helping others who were going through the same trials as I had. This was important to me. I saw how they found hope and strength to fight their addiction. It inspired me and gave me faith in myself. One day, during a therapy session, I realized that I had forgiven myself. This was the hardest step for me, but I understood it was necessary for my recovery. I no longer felt constant pain and guilt. I began to live anew, starting from a clean slate. It was a great relief for me. I knew that my journey to recovery was not yet over, but I was ready for it. Every day I was becoming stronger and more confident in myself. I knew I could handle any challenges that came my way. My self-belief was growing, and I began to envision a future without drugs. This was important to me. One day, I met a girl named Emily. She also worked at the rehabilitation center. We quickly found common ground and became close friends. Emily was a very kind and understanding person. She supported me in everything and helped me fight my addiction. Her friendship was very important to me. Over time, our relationship grew into something more. We started dating and spent a lot of time together. Emily became a true friend and partner to me. She showed me that it was possible to live happily without drugs. Her love and support were crucial for me. She became a part of my new life. We worked together at the rehabilitation center, helping others. It was our shared mission and purpose. We saw how other people found hope and strength to fight their addiction. This brought us great satisfaction and inspiration. We knew we were doing something important and meaningful. One day, during one of our joint tasks, I met a guy named Matt. He was also struggling with his addiction and seeking help. We quickly became friends and started supporting each other. Matt was a very strong and determined person. His example inspired me. He showed me that it was possible to fight and win. Together with Matt and Emily, we created a support group for people battling addiction. We gathered together, shared our stories, and supported each other. This was very important to us. We saw how others found strength and hope. It brought us great satisfaction and inspiration. Over time, our support group became very popular. People came to us seeking help and support. We saw them find strength and hope to fight their addiction. This was very important to us. We knew we were doing something significant and useful. It gave us great satisfaction and inspiration. We continued working at the rehabilitation center and helping others. It was our shared mission and purpose in life. We saw others finding hope and strength to fight their addiction. This brought us great satisfaction and inspiration. We knew we were doing something important and valuable. One day, during one of our joint tasks, I realized that my life had changed forever. I was no longer that weak, independent person. I had become strong and confident. I had found my purpose in life and was helping others. This was a major achievement for me. I knew that my path to recovery was not over, but I was ready for it. Every day I was becoming stronger and more confident in myself. I knew I could handle any challenges. My faith in myself was growing, and I began to see a future without drugs. This was important to me. My life became fulfilling and happy. I had found my purpose in life and was helping others. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. It brought me great satisfaction and inspiration. I knew I could face any challenges. My life had changed forever. One day, I decided to write a book about my struggle with addiction. I wanted to share my story with others who might be going through the same trials. I wanted to show them that it is possible to change one's life and find a path. This was an important task for me. I began writing the book and sharing my story with others. I talked about my struggle, how I dealt with difficulties, and found my purpose in life. I wanted to inspire others and show them that they could live happily without drugs. This was a crucial task for me. The book became popular and found many readers. People wrote me letters, thanking me for sharing my story. They shared their own trials and how my book had helped them find strength and hope. This was a great pleasure for me. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. I continued writing and sharing my story with others. It was an important task for me. I saw how my words inspired others and helped them fight their addiction. This brought me great satisfaction and inspiration. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. My life became fulfilling and happy. I had found my purpose in life and was helping others. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. It brought me great satisfaction and inspiration. I knew I could face any challenges. My life had changed forever. One day, I met an old friend who was also struggling with his addiction. He told me that my book had helped him find strength and hope. He shared his story and explained how my words had inspired him. This was a great pleasure for me. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. We began working together on new projects aimed at helping people with their addiction. We wanted to create new programs and resources to assist others. This was an important task for us. We knew we could do something meaningful and valuable. Over time, our projects became very popular. People came to us seeking help and support. We saw them find strength and hope to fight their addiction. This was very important to us. We knew we were doing something significant and useful. It gave us great satisfaction and inspiration. My life became fulfilling and happy. I had found my purpose in life and was helping others. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. It brought me great satisfaction and inspiration. I knew I could handle any challenges. My life had changed forever. One day, I received an invitation to speak at a conference dedicated to fighting addiction. I was very excited and grateful for the opportunity. I wanted to share my story with others and show them that it is possible to change one's life. This was an important task for me. At the conference, I talked about my struggle with addiction, how I overcame difficulties, and found my purpose in life. I saw people listening to me with understanding and empathy. I knew my words could inspire them and help them find strength and hope. This was a great pleasure for me. After my speech, people came up to me and thanked me for my words. They shared their own trials and how my story had helped them find strength and hope. This was a great pleasure for me. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. My life had changed forever. I continued working on new projects and helping others. It was an important task for me. I saw how my words inspired others and helped them fight their addiction. This brought me great satisfaction and inspiration. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. My life became fulfilling and happy. I had found my purpose in life and was helping others. I knew I was doing something important and valuable. It brought me great satisfaction and inspiration. I knew I could handle any challenges. My life had changed forever. One day, I received an invitation to appear on television. I was very excited and grateful for the opportunity. I wanted to share my story with a broader audience and show them that it is possible to change one's life. This was an important task for me. Now, there's going to be a lot of I. I was heading home from the TV studio, and within minutes, I felt the heavy burden of the past weighing down on my shoulders again. The interview that was supposed to mark my new beginning drew more attention than I could have ever imagined. I never thought that those I tried to leave behind could reappear in my life. The darkness of the streets, which I once considered my territory, seemed even more menacing. I spotted them right away, shadowy figures stretching from the fences and alleyways. They were a part of my past, a part I would have fled to the ends of the earth to avoid encountering again. The thought started swirling in my mind of what could happen if they decided to come back into my life. I tried to escape from these people and forget them, but now I felt them becoming part of my terrifying present once more. Panic seized me as I realized that I couldn't just walk past them. I saw their looks, filled with hateful malice and cruelty. They probably wouldn't forgive me for not only escaping their grip, but also sharing my story with the world. My success, it seems, was like a red rag to a bull for them. Tears of frustration began to well up in my eyes. I recalled how these people used to pressure me, how I was their puppet transporting drugs. Now that I was trying to find a new path in life, they likely wanted to settle old scores. I tried to walk faster, feeling my heart pounding in my temples. My thoughts raced, trying to find a way to avoid their wrath. My success didn't sit well with them, and I was sure they were already planning their revenge. Their footsteps grew closer, and I felt sweat breaking out on my skin from fear. My legs felt heavy, and I realized that running might be my only option. But was I fast enough to escape? I remembered how I had recently dreamed of a normal life, of living without fear. But now all of that seemed like an illusion. My dreams of a new start were crashing against the harsh reality that was so unforgiving. I noticed that they were already nearby, and I had no choice but to head toward a forgotten corner to hide. My fears had become reality, and I was no longer confident in my ability to handle the situation. My heart was racing faster, and I felt life slipping away from me like sand through my fingers. I could no longer distinguish what was a real threat and what was just my fears. I recalled how I had killed a friend, and those memories tore me apart from the inside. The question spun in my mind, could my former friends really harm me, or was this just my fears blending with reality? I couldn't stop my thoughts, which weighed down on me like a heavy stone. I was tormented by memories of the past, how I was part of the drug trade, how I severed ties with my family and became a criminal. My mother died because of her addiction, and I became a victim of the same problem, trying to find a way to save myself. I could never forget the day when I accidentally killed a friend. That was the turning point in my life, and I've always held myself responsible for his death. That killing haunted me, and now my former friends were back to highlight my guilt. I found myself in a dark alley where my fear was already waiting for me. I heard their voices growing closer and closer. It was like a scene from a nightmare, but the reality was even worse. I kept trying to find a way out, but all my efforts seemed futile. I felt my body succumbing to the tension, and fear settled in my heart. That was the moment I realized I could no longer control my life. I thought about my mother and how her addiction had caused me so much pain. She was part of the same vicious cycle as me. Her death was a horrible blow, but I remained trapped in that same dreadful life. I decided that maybe there was only one way to escape this hell: suicide. I could no longer bear the hopelessness and fear that accompanied me every step of the way. It was a tough decision, but it seemed like the only way out. I tried to focus on something positive, something that could save me, but it was impossible. I felt my strength leaving me, and I was no longer sure I could continue fighting. I heard someone approaching from behind, and a feeling overwhelmed me that this was the end. My former friends were already near, and I knew this could be my last night alive. I couldn't ignore what was happening around me and began to realize that I might no longer be able to escape my past. They were part of my life, and I felt like I had to find a way to overcome them and my internal struggle. I remember how I had recently dreamed of a peaceful life, but now all of that seemed out of reach. My addiction and fears had become my constant companions, and I didn't know how to break free from this horrible chain. I recalled all the moments when I was on the edge of life and death. It was a clear sign that my life had turned into an endless struggle. I tried to stop my thoughts, but everything kept circling back to fear and pain. My hands started trembling from fear, and I again thought about how I could save myself. I was no longer sure I could find a path to salvation. Everything seemed utterly hopeless, and I felt life slipping out of my grasp. I tried to distract myself, but the terrible thoughts about my past wouldn't let go. I remembered my first steps in the drug trade, how easily I succumbed to temptation. Everything I did was soaked in fear and despair, and now it was back at my doorstep. I felt different parts of my personality battling inside me, the part that longed for salvation and the part that was drowning in darkness. My former friends reminded me once again how hard it is to escape the shadow of the past that follows me everywhere. Let me know if you need anything else. I was tormented by memories of working as a drug courier, of those same people who are now trying to harm me, controlling my life. I became part of their system, and it left indelible marks on my soul. I tried to forget all these horrors, but every sound, every movement in the darkness reminded me of how easily I could be destroyed. I clearly understood that my past life might eventually break free and consume me along with it. I recalled how quickly I succumbed to the temptation of drugs, and how easily I became part of the darkness that engulfed my life. It was a path I couldn't change, and now my old acquaintances wanted to complete their revenge. I didn't know what to do. My only hope for escape seemed like a mirage. I felt that I could no longer handle this pressure, and my mind sought any way to escape the reality that had become utterly hopeless. My body refused to move, and my thoughts were overwhelmed by horrifying memories. I felt as if I was always carrying an invisible burden that prevented me from living peacefully. My fears became more and more real, and I was on the verge of losing consciousness. I tried to gather my thoughts, but it was difficult due to the panic that had gripped me. I remembered the moments when I became part of the gang, when I fell for their promises and tempting offers that led me to this nightmare. I understood that now my former friends wanted to finish what they had started once. They would not forgive me for my success, and now my fears had become even more real. I knew that this situation could be fatal for me. I tried to find any way to escape, but all my efforts proved futile. I felt my strength leaving me, and every new sound from the darkness made me believe that my death was inevitable. I dreamt of finding peace and stability, but reality constantly forced me back into the same hell. My attempts to find a new path were fruitless, and I felt that I was returning to old problems. My former acquaintances were now at the center of my fears. I heard their voices getting closer, and this feeling only heightened my anxiety. I didn't know if I would find a way to escape this situation alive. I tried to calm down, but my nerves were on edge. My thoughts about the future were filled with fear and hopelessness, and I felt my life slipping out of control. I thought over and over about how I could find a way to save myself. I remembered everything I had gone through, all the hardships I had faced. My past was full of tragedy and pain, and I felt that my life could not be saved. I wanted to find a way out, but all my attempts were in vain. My fears had turned into reality, and I realized that I could be destroyed at any moment. I felt that my life was ending, and I didn't know how to find a way to avoid this cruel fate. I heard the footsteps getting even closer, and my heart beat in a panicked rhythm. I was on the edge, and my thoughts were filled with only one idea: to find a way to escape this horrifying nightmare. I decided that my struggle was just beginning, and I had to find a way to cope with this situation at any cost. I felt the tension rising in the air. The neglected neighborhood I called home seemed even gloomier in the darkness. I suddenly noticed familiar faces in the shadows, people I once called friends who had now become my greatest enemies. They approached me from both sides, and I felt myself slipping back into the nightmare of my past. "Well, look who it is, the celebrity. Decided to forget about us?" one of them taunted. I knew better than to argue with them. They were merciless. "We can't let you interfere with our operations," another one sneered, holding a knife in his hand. I realized that this night might be my last. My heart raced, and my thoughts tangled in my head. How had I fallen so deeply into this again? They surrounded me, and I felt fear filling my heart. I tried to speak calmly, but the words were hard to come by. "I'm not here to interfere. I just want to live my life," I said, hoping for some mercy, but their laughter was cold and unrelenting. "Forget the past? You're already part of this world, and you'll never get out." They stepped closer, and I knew I had to fight for my life. Feeling adrenaline start to flood my veins, I quickly turned and punched one of the attackers in the face. I knew this was just the beginning, and I needed to be ready for anything. The knives glinted in the streetlight, and I felt fear mixing with determination. They lunged at me from all sides, and I felt each blow leave a new scar on my body. But I didn't stop. Every time I fell, I got up again. This was a fight not just for my life, but for my future. Each knife strike, each fist that hit my body reminded me why I started this fight. I saw my mother's face, her despair, her death. I knew I couldn't allow myself to become like her. At one moment, when it seemed everything was lost, I felt an unknown strength igniting inside me. I gathered all my energy and charged at one of the attackers, knocking the knife from his hand. This was my chance. Using the element of surprise, I started fighting the other attackers. They didn't expect such determination and speed from me. This gave me a slight advantage, which I used to escape. Running was difficult, but I couldn't stop. Feeling the adrenaline still coursing through my body, I raced through the dark streets, searching for cover. My lungs burned, but I knew I couldn't stop. I found refuge in an old abandoned house. Here I could rest a little and bandage my wounds. Every breath was painful, but I was grateful to still be alive. Sitting in the darkness, I pondered my life. Why did I always find myself in such situations? I wanted to change my life, but the past constantly pulled me back. I saw my mother's face before me and heard her voice encouraging me not to give up. My thoughts were filled with fear and despair. I knew I couldn't stop, as every moment I allowed fear to overtake me could be my last. My struggle had become part of me, and I didn't know if I could find peace. I felt my body exhausted from the fight. Pain pierced every part of me, and I thought about how hard things would be going forward. I kept returning to memories of the times when I tried to find a way to escape this dreadful world. My attempts to escape had become a struggle for survival. I constantly felt my fear and desperation intertwining into one horrifying reality. I tried to find a way to avoid my past, but it always found a way to catch up with me. I remembered my mother and how her addiction had destroyed her. It was a terrible path I had witnessed, and now I realized that this path might repeat itself in my life. I felt that this thought continued to haunt me. I sat in the darkness, examining my wounds and reflecting on how it all could end. I couldn't understand why I always ended up in such situations. My attempts to find peace and stability had been futile. My former acquaintances, who had become my enemies, made me realize that my past could not be forgotten. I felt their malice and hatred filling me with fear and anxiety. I tried to find any way to avoid their revenge. I tried to calm down and find a way to end this struggle. But even when everything quieted down and I found a brief moment of peace, I knew it wasn't the end. My struggle continued, and I had to find a way to cope with this dreadful world that had once again become part of my life. As I bandaged the visible wounds with scraps of old clothing I found in the abandoned house where I was hiding, I tried not to lose consciousness. The wounds hurt unbearably, but I knew I had to hold on. From time to time, I heard the footsteps of my friends, continuing to search for me. They were relentless. I heard their voices echoing in the darkness and knew I couldn't hide for long. My heart raced, and every sound made me flinch. I had to find a better hiding place, or it would be the end for me. I decided to leave the house and crawl towards a nearby dumpster. Realizing that this might be my only chance for escape, I used my remaining strength to crawl to it. Every movement was difficult, but I couldn't stop. Hiding in the dumpster, I felt my body giving out. Darkness began to engulf my consciousness, and I lost consciousness. I remained unconscious until morning, with only fragments of nightmares and memories filling my mind. When I finally came to, I felt sharp pain and an unfamiliar environment. I was in a hospital. A nurse beside my bed told me that I had been found in the morning, barely alive, with numerous wounds and severe blood loss. I learned that I had been in a coma for a week. It seemed unreal, as if the entire time had been just a dream. But when I felt the pain in every muscle, I understood it was reality. I had been saved, but I could barely move. The nurse added that the police had arrested my friends a few days after the attack. They were already under investigation for other crimes, and my case only added evidence against them. This gave me hope that the nightmare of the past would not return. I felt an incredible relief, but at the same time, deep exhaustion. My body and mind were drained. I closed my eyes and focused on gathering my strength. I needed to heal and figure out how to move forward. The days in the hospital passed slowly. I watched as the medical staff constantly cared for me, helping me return to life. They were extraordinarily kind and professional. I felt grateful for every moment of their care. My time in the hospital gave me the chance to reflect on everything that had happened. I thought about my past, my mistakes, and what I needed to do to avoid falling back into that nightmare. It was a time for reflection and planning. After a few weeks in the hospital, I was finally able to get out of bed and start my rehabilitation. Each step was painful, but I knew it was necessary. I had to return to the normal life that awaited me. One day, while sitting in the hospital park, a psychologist approached me. We talked about my past, my fears, and how I could move forward. He gave me a lot of helpful advice, and I began to understand what needed to change in my life. The psychologist helped me realize that my addiction was merely a symptom of my unresolved inner issues. I started working on myself, trying to identify the root of my problems and address them. It was a difficult process, but I was ready. My rehabilitation took a long time, but I saw progress. I began to believe in myself and my abilities. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could influence my future. This gave me the motivation to keep going. When I finally left the hospital, I was welcomed by friends and family who had supported me throughout this time. Their support was invaluable, and I felt I was not alone in my struggle. This gave me the strength to move forward. Returning home, I started a new life. I found a new job and began building relationships with people who supported and understood me. It was a new beginning, and I was grateful for it. Over time, I met a woman who became my wife. She was my love and support. Together, we built our life, and I felt that I had finally found my place in the world. My life gained meaning. Together, we created a family. We had 3 wonderful children who became the center of our world. They filled my life with joy and love. I saw my future in them and knew that I needed to be a role model for them. My past was difficult, but it taught me to value life and never give up. I saw how one can fall, but I also knew that there is always a chance to rise again. My life became a testament to the fact that anyone can change their fate. Today, I live happily with my family, and we face all challenges together. My past is behind me, but it has become a part of me that has made me stronger. I am grateful for every day I have and every moment I share with those I love. Thank you all for paying attention to my life story. The night is darkest before the dawn.